The Indomitable hung in the abyss like a predator waiting to strike, its massive hull shimmering against the backdrop of distant stars. At 22 kilometers long, it was a warship unlike any the galaxy had ever seen, a fusion of humanity's unrelenting determination and stolen alien technologies. Its arrival in the Andril system was heralded by an unnatural stillness, a quiet before the storm. Captain Liana Vale stood on the bridge, her hands clasped tightly behind her back as she stared out the viewport. She was a woman of sharp angles, her jawline as severe as her gaze. Every officer on the bridge knew better than to speak without her permission. Her silence carried the weight of command. Today, however, even she felt the tremor of unease coursing through the ship. They were about to face the impossible. The pre-march fleet is holding position, Commander Dax Carter reported from the tactical station. His voice was steady, though his hands betrayed a slight tremor as he manipulated the ship's holographic interface. 52 warships. Flagship identified as the Oblivion's Wrath. Liana turned her head slightly, her piercing eyes meeting his. And their movements? They're waiting for us to make the first move, Dax replied. It's a standard pre-march tactic. Force the prey to act out of desperation. Liana let out a slow breath, her gaze shifting back to the viewport. The Primarchs were humanity's greatest enemy, an ancient species that had ruled the galaxy uncontested for millennia. They were towering beings of silver and crimson, their technology leagues beyond anything humanity had achieved. Yet here they were, holding their line. Because of the Indomitable. Ensign Pharaoh, Liana said, her voice cutting through the tense air. Status report on the Arc Drive. Ensign Pharaoh, a young man barely out of the academy, snapped to attention. Arc Drive is at 97% charge, ma'am. Full capacity in 3 minutes? Liana nodded, her lips thinning into a line. The Arc Drive was humanity's greatest achievement, and its greatest gamble. A weapon designed to destabilize spacetime itself, capable of annihilating entire fleets in a single strike. It was also dangerously unstable. Good, she said. We'll give them something to think about. Dax frowned, stepping closer. Captain, with respect, are we really going to engage them head-on? Even with the Arc Drive, those are Primarchs out there. If this fails? It won't fail, Liana interrupted, her tone icy. The Indomitable wasn't built to fail. Dax hesitated, then nodded. Yes, ma'am. A hush fell over the bridge as they approached the decisive moment. Liana could feel the weight of every soul aboard pressing down on her shoulders. 30,000 crew members, each one relying on her to guide them through the storm. Failure wasn't an option. Patch me through to the fleet, she ordered. A moment later, her image was broadcast across the screens of every human vessel in the Andril system. Hundreds of smaller ships formed a defensive line around the Indomitable, their crews waiting for her command. This is Captain Liana Vale, she began, her voice steady and unyielding. Today we stand at the precipice of history. The Primarchs have ruled the stars through fear and domination, but no more. Today humanity shows them what it means to fight, what it means to endure, and what it means to win. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle over them. We are the Indomitable, and we will not be broken. Cheers erupted across the fleet, a roar of defiance that echoed even in the silence of the void. Liana turned to Dax, her expression hard as steel. Charge the primary cannon, she ordered. Prepare to fire on the Oblivion's Wrath. The pre-march flagship was a thing of terrifying beauty, its elongated form glowing with a malevolent crimson light. Its hull was laced with energy conduits that pulsed like veins, and its weapon systems were powerful enough to obliterate a planet. Yet even it hesitated as the Indomitable powered up its primary weapon. Liana could see the subtle shifts in the pre-march formation on the tactical display. They were adjusting, preparing for a counterstrike. It didn't matter. She had no intention of giving them the chance. Target locked, Dax said. Ready to fire on your command? Fire, Liana said without hesitation. The Indomitable shuddered as its main cannon discharged, a blinding beam of energy lancing through the void. The shot struck the Oblivion's Wrath dead center, its shields flaring violently before collapsing under the immense power. The impact tore through the flagship's hull, splitting it in two. The bridge erupted in cheers, but Liana held up a hand, silencing them. Hold your positions. This isn't over. She was right. The pre-march fleet responded with terrifying precision, their ships breaking formation to encircle the Indomitable. Energy beams and projectiles lit up the darkness as the battle began in earnest. The Indomitable's shields flared, absorbing the brunt of the attack, but the strain was immense. Shields at 83%, Pharaoh reported, his voice tight. Redirect power to the forward arrays, Liana ordered. We need to keep their heavy hitters at bay. Dax worked furiously at his console, coordinating the ship's defense. Their fighters are slipping through the cracks. We'll need to deploy interceptors. Do it, Liana said. And tell the fleet to maintain their formation. If they break ranks, we're finished. The battle was chaos, a symphony of destruction. The smaller human ships darted through the void, engaging pre-march vessels in desperate skirmishes. Explosions lit up the darkness as ships on both sides were destroyed. The Indomitable remained at the center of it all, its weapon systems tearing through enemy ships with brutal efficiency. But the Primarchs weren't going down without a fight. A sudden impact rocked the ship, throwing several crew members to the floor. What was that? Liana demanded. Direct hit to the starboard side, Dax said, his tone grim. Hull breach on deck 12. Emergency containment systems are holding for now. Get repair teams on it, she ordered. And return fire. The tension on the bridge was palpable. Every second felt like an eternity as the battle raged on. Liana's mind raced, analyzing the tactical display and searching for an opening. The Primarchs had underestimated the Indomitable, but they were adapting quickly. Arc drive is fully charged, Pharaoh reported. We can fire at your command? Liana hesitated. The arc drive was their ace in the hole, but using it now would be risky. If it failed, they'd be left vulnerable. Before she could decide, a new alert flashed on the tactical display. Ma'am, Dax said, his voice tight with dread, we've got a problem. They're deploying a planet killer. Liana's stomach dropped. The planet killer was the Primarch's deadliest weapon, a massive ship capable of annihilating entire worlds with a single shot. Its arrival meant one thing: they intended to leave no survivors. Time to firing range? She asked. For minutes, Dax said. Maybe less. Liana's jaw tightened. They were out of time. Prepare the arc drive, she said. We're taking it out. Captain, if we fire the arc drive now, the energy feedback could... I know the risks, she said sharply. Do it. The crew moved with precision, their fear overshadowed by their trust in her command. The Indomitable turned to face the planet killer, its weapon systems glowing with deadly energy. As the countdown to destruction ticked away, Liana stood at the center of the bridge, unyielding. They would either save humanity or die trying. There was no middle ground. Arc drive ready, Pharaoh said. Liana took a deep breath. Fire? The Indomitable unleashed its full power, the arc drive's energy beam tearing through spacetime itself. The shot struck the planet killer head-on, ripping it apart in a cataclysmic explosion that lit up the void. The shockwave rippled through the battlefield, disabling several pre-march ships and giving the human fleet a brief reprieve. Cheers erupted once more, but Liana didn't celebrate. She knew the battle wasn't over yet. Status report, she said. The planet killer is destroyed, Dax said, a note of awe in his voice. But the arc drive systems are offline. It'll take hours to recharge. Liana nodded. We've bought ourselves some time. Now let's make it count. As the human fleet regrouped, the Indomitable prepared for the next phase of the battle. They had struck a devastating blow, but the Primarchs were far from defeated. Liana's gaze hardened. The war wasn't over, but for the first time humanity had proven that they could fight, and win. And the galaxy would never be the same. The wreckage of the planet killer drifted silently in the void, its obliterated husk a testament to humanity's defiance. But there was no time to savor the victory. The Indomitable was surrounded, a lone titan standing against the relentless pre-march fleet. On the bridge, Captain Liana Vale paced with measured urgency. The hollow display shimmered before her, detailing the battlefield in real time. While the destruction of the planet killer had shaken the Primarchs, their retaliation was swift. Their fleet reorganized with a precision that could only be described as mechanical. Even now, 3 massive dreadnoughts flanked the human line, preparing to box them in. Damage report, Liana demanded, her voice cutting through the tense hum of the bridge. Shields holding at 61%, but their concentrated fire is wearing us down, Dax Carter said, his brow furrowed as he analyzed the incoming data. Hull breaches on decks 12 through 15 are being sealed, but the starboard rail cannons are offline. Liana clenched her fists. The Indomitable was the pinnacle of human engineering, but even it had limits. And the Primarchs? They were testing every single one. Commander, we need those cannons operational, she said. Pharaoh, status on the arc drive recharge. Approximately 43 minutes to full capacity, Ensign Pharaoh replied, his face pale but determined. I've rerouted auxiliary power to speed up the process, but it won't be quick. 43 minutes, Liana murmured, glancing at the display. The Primarchs weren't going to give them that much time. They were predators and the Indomitable was bleeding. Her comm panel chimed. A voice crackled through, raw and anxious. "This is Captain Armin of the Resolute. We've lost our forward batteries and can't hold the line much longer." Liana's jaw tightened. The Resolute was one of the smaller frigates tasked with guarding the fleet's perimeter. Losing it would leave the human formation vulnerable to a full encirclement. "Tell them to fall back to the second line," she said. "Dax, deploy fighter squadrons to cover their retreat. We need to buy as much time as we can." "Yes, ma'am," Dax replied, his hands flying over the console. Outside, the void lit up with flashes of light as the Indomitable S fighters engaged the enemy. Tiny by comparison, they wove between the larger ships like gnats, their pulse cannons chipping away at the Primarch's shields. It was a desperate dance, one that could only delay the inevitable. "Captain," Dax said, his tone sharp, "I'm picking up energy spikes from the Primarch fleet. It looks like they're deploying disruptor waves." Liana froze. Disruptor waves were the Primarch's way of leveling the playing field. By destabilizing local spacetime, they could temporarily disable advanced technology, like the Indomitable S shields. "How long until impact?" she asked. "Less than 2 minutes." "Damn it," she muttered under her breath. "All hands brace for incoming disruptor waves. Redirect power to internal systems and prepare for fallback protocols." The bridge lights dimmed as power was diverted. Across the ship, alarms blared and crew members scrambled to secure vital systems. Liana felt the familiar hum of the shields vanish, replaced by an unsettling silence. The Indomitable was naked. The first wave hit like a thunderclap. The ship groaned under the strain, its massive frame shuddering violently. Consoles sparked, and for a terrifying moment, the artificial gravity flickered. "Systems holding," Dax said, though his voice was tight. "But we've lost long-range targeting and external comms." The second wave followed, ripping through what was left of their defenses. This time, the lights dimmed further, and a thin layer of frost began to form on the viewport as the environmental system struggled to compensate. "Multiple enemy vessels closing in," Pharaoh shouted. "They're targeting our engines." Liana slammed her hand on the console. The Primarchs were merciless, exploiting every weakness without hesitation. "Bring the aft turrets online manually," she ordered. "We'll hold them off ourselves if we have to." The bridge crew scrambled to comply, their movements frantic but precise. The tension was suffocating, but no one hesitated. They all knew the stakes. "Captain," Dax said, his tone grim, "I'm detecting an anomaly near the edge of the battlefield." "It's massive? What kind of anomaly?" Liana asked, her eyes narrowing. Before Dax could answer, the holodisplay shifted, zooming in on the source of the disturbance. Liana's breath caught in her throat. A rift was opening, a swirling vortex of crimson and black that seemed to tear the fabric of reality itself. From the rift emerged a ship. No, a monstrosity. It dwarfed even the Indomitable, its jagged, organic hull glowing with an unnatural light. The Primarch's flagship had been imposing, but this was something else entirely. "The Eternal Sovereign," Dax said, his voice barely above a whisper. Liana's heart sank. She had heard the stories, the whispered tales of the Primarch's most feared weapon. The Eternal Sovereign was said to be a relic from their ancient wars, a warship so advanced that it defied comprehension. And now it was here. The bridge fell silent as the crew stared at the monstrosity on the screen. It moved with an eerie grace, its spiked tendrils extending like the arms of a predator reaching for its prey. "Signal the fleet," Liana said, her voice cutting through the silence. "Tell them to fall back and regroup around the Indomitable. We'll face it together." "But, Captain," Pharaoh began. "We'll face it together," she repeated, her tone leaving no room for argument. The human fleet moved to obey, their battered ships forming a defensive ring around the Indomitable. The Eternal Sovereign loomed closer, its presence a chilling reminder of humanity's vulnerability. "Analysis," Liana demanded. Dax shook his head. "Its energy output is off the charts. Our weapons won't even scratch its shields." Liana's mind raced. She had expected a fight, but not this. The arc drive was their only hope, but it was still minutes away from being ready. Minutes they didn't have. A sudden thought struck her, a gamble but one worth taking. "Dax, can we overload the secondary reactors?" His eyes widened. "Overload them? Captain, that could tear the ship apart." "I know," she said. "But if we can channel the energy into a focused burst, we might be able to destabilize the Sovereign's shields." It's a long shot, but it's the only shot we've got. Dax hesitated, then nodded. I'll make it happen. As he worked, the Eternal Sovereign unleashed its first attack. A beam of pure energy lanced through the void, slicing through two human frigates like paper. The explosions lit up the darkness, and Liana felt the loss like a dagger to the heart. Captain, Pharaoh said, his voice trembling, the Sovereign is targeting us. Liana's gaze hardened. Let it. The bridge shuddered as the ship absorbed the impact. Sparks flew, and a console exploded in a shower of debris. But the Indomitable held. Reactor overload in progress, Dax said. We'll only get one shot at this. Liana nodded. Prepare to fire. And someone get me comms with the fleet? The connection crackled to life, and Liana's voice echoed across the remaining ships. This is Captain Vale. We're going to punch a hole in that thing's shields. When we do, I need every ship to target its core. No hesitation, no second guessing. This is our chance. A chorus of acknowledgments came through, the desperation in their voices tempered by a flicker of hope. Overload at critical levels, Dax said. Firing now. The Indomitable unleashed its fury, a blinding surge of energy that struck the Eternal Sovereign like a thunderbolt. For a moment, its shields flared, struggling to contain the impact. And then they collapsed. Now? Liana shouted. The human fleet opened fire, their combined firepower slamming into the Eternal Sovereign. The monstrous ship writhed, its hull cracking and buckling under the onslaught. But it wasn't enough. As the Sovereign charged its weapons for a final, devastating blow, Liana made her decision. Prepare the arc drive, she said. We're going in. The Eternal Sovereign loomed larger on the Indomitable's forward viewport, an incomprehensible mass of jagged black metal spires and pulsating crimson energy conduits. Its core, a roiling sphere of chaotic energy, glowed menacingly through cracks in its fractured hull. Though the human fleet's concentrated assault had damaged the monstrous ship, it remained a terrifying juggernaut. Its retaliation would be swift and annihilating. Captain Liana Vale's resolve hardened as she gripped the rail of the command console. Every instinct told her this was madness, but retreat was no longer an option. Humanity's survival hinged on this gambit. Arc drive status? Liana asked, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. Ensign Pharaoh's trembling hands flew over his console. Power levels at 94%, Captain. If we engage now, the stability matrix may not hold. Liana turned to him, her gaze like steel. It doesn't need to hold long. Just enough to get us in and out. Dax, plot a course directly into the Sovereign's core. Commander Dax Carter's head shot up, his face pale with disbelief. You're not serious. I am, Liana said firmly. That core is the only thing keeping that monstrosity operational. If we destroy it, the Sovereign dies, and with it, the Premarch fleet loses its rallying point. They'll scatter. Dax hesitated, his fingers hovering over the navigation panel. Captain, even if we breach its hull, there's no guarantee we'll survive the explosion. We won't survive out here either, Liana countered. And neither will Earth. Plot the course. Dax nodded reluctantly and began inputting the coordinates. The tension on the bridge was palpable. Around them, the Indomitable shuddered violently as another blast from the Sovereign tore through its remaining shields. Captain, shouted Pharaoh. Enemy ships are closing in fast. We'll be overwhelmed before we reach the Sovereign. Launch all remaining fighters, Liana ordered. Tell them to draw enemy fire. This ship must reach that core. Outside, the remnants of the human fleet moved to cover the Indomitable. Frigates and corvettes, their hulls scarred and battered, unleashed everything they had against the encroaching Premarch vessels. Swarms of fighter craft darted between the behemoths, creating chaos in the Premarch formation. The Resolute, barely holding together, rammed headlong into an enemy dreadnought, its reactor detonating in a blinding flash. The sacrifice bought the Indomitable a precious few seconds. We're clear, Dax said. Trajectory locked. Estimated time to impact, 90 seconds? The bridge crew braced themselves as the ship surged forward, engines roaring with unrestrained power. The Sovereign's fractured hull loomed closer, its surface a chaotic landscape of glowing conduits and jagged towers. Automated defenses sprang to life, spewing streams of plasma and railgun fire. Evasive maneuvers. Liana barked. The Indomitable weaved through the onslaught, its hull taking hit after hit. Sparks flew as a console exploded, and the ship's internal lights flickered ominously. Forward plating compromised, Dax reported. We've lost maneuvering thrusters on Deck 7. Keep us steady, Liana said. We're almost there. As the Indomitable breached the Sovereign's outer defenses, the bridge crew got their first look at the alien vessel's interior. It was a labyrinth of pulsating energy conduits and shifting metallic structures, as if the ship were alive and in constant motion. Navigation data flickered erratically on the holo display, struggling to make sense of the environment. "Core is dead ahead," Dax said, his voice tight. "But the Sovereign's interior defenses are activating." Suddenly, the Indomitable was bombarded by energy tendrils that lashed out from the walls like living creatures. One struck the port side, carving a deep gash into the hull. The ship groaned under the strain, but it pressed forward. "Captain," Pharaoh shouted, "energy spikes are off the charts. That core is unstable. We'll have seconds at best once it goes critical." "That's all we need," Liana said. "Arm the torpedoes and prepare for manual detonation." The Indomitable reached the core chamber, a vast, cavernous space dominated by the seething sphere of energy at its center. The core pulsed erratically, its unstable power output radiating waves of heat and light. Liana's gaze locked onto it. This was their target. "Fire torpedoes," she commanded. The ship's remaining launchers released their payload, 2 antimatter torpedoes streaking toward the core. But before they could connect, the Sovereign's defenses reacted, a shield of shimmering energy snapping into place around the core. "They fortified it," Dax shouted. "We need another way." Liana's mind raced. They were out of time and options. Then a grim realization struck her. "Pharaoh," she said, her voice calm amidst the chaos. "Begin emergency protocols. Transfer all remaining power to the arc drive." "Captain?" Pharaoh looked at her wide-eyed. "We're going to ram it," she said simply. The bridge fell silent. The crew exchanged glances, understanding the finality of her words. But there was no argument, no hesitation. They knew what was at stake. The Indomitable surged forward, its engines roaring at full power. The core's defenses lashed out, striking the ship with everything they had. Hull breaches erupted across multiple decks, and fires raged as the ship's systems failed one by one. Liana stood tall, her hands gripping the command console. "It's been an honor," she said quietly, her words meant for every soul aboard. "Brace for impact." The Indomitable collided with the core, its massive frame shattering as the antimatter within its reactors ignited. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Then, the core exploded in a cataclysmic burst of energy, tearing the Sovereign apart from within. In the void, the shockwave rippled outward, consuming the Sovereign and any pre-march vessels caught in its path. The human fleet watched from a distance as the light of the explosion faded, leaving nothing but debris in its wake. On Earth, millions looked to the sky, their prayers answered by the sacrifice of one ship and its crew. The pre-march fleet, now leaderless, scattered into the void, their once united front broken. The Indomitable was gone, but its name would live on. In the annals of history, it became a symbol of humanity's unyielding spirit, a testament to their refusal to bow to extinction. Captain Liana Vale and her crew had done the impossible. They had saved the galaxy. The shockwave from the Eternal Sovereign's destruction rippled through the void, a cascade of debris and energy scattering across the battlefield. The human fleet, battered and broken, floated in stunned silence. On every surviving ship, crews stared out of viewports or at flickering holo displays, watching as the monstrous vessel that had threatened their very existence disintegrated into nothingness. But the Indomitable was gone. On the bridge of the Resolute, Commander Armin, now commanding what remained of the fleet, stood frozen, his hands gripping the edge of his console. His ship was in ruins, its crew decimated, but his focus was elsewhere. The last transmission from the Indomitable echoed in his mind, Captain Vale's calm, determined voice. "This is for all of us. Tell them we fought until the end." "Commander," a young officer said, her voice shaking as she interrupted his thoughts. "Long-range scanners confirm, the Eternal Sovereign is destroyed. The pre-march fleet is retreating." The announcement was met with stunned silence, then scattered cheers from the bridge crew. For the first time in weeks, maybe years, hope cut through the suffocating fear that had gripped humanity since the war began. Armin nodded slowly, his expression somber. "Get me a comm channel to all surviving ships." The officer quickly complied, and moments later, Armin's voice rang across the fleet. "This is Commander Armin. The Indomitable has succeeded. The Eternal Sovereign is no more, and the pre-march fleet is in retreat. We owe our lives, our very existence, to the bravery and sacrifice of Captain Vale and her crew. Let us honor them by rebuilding what they gave everything to protect. Humanity endures." Back on Earth, The victory was announced with a mixture of triumph and sorrow. People gathered in public squares, watching as news feeds broadcast the footage of the battle. The final moments of the Indomitable's charge, captured by nearby ships, played over and over again, a symbol of courage in the face of annihilation. In the aftermath, Earth's leaders and military strategists convened. With the pre-March fleet scattered and their chain of command in disarray, humanity finally had the opportunity to go on the offensive. The war wasn't over, but the tide had turned. For the first time, the galaxy seemed a little less dark. Weeks later, amidst the ruins of humanity's outer colonies, a small, unassuming memorial was erected on a desolate planet scarred by war. It was simple, a gleaming obelisk of black stone, inscribed with the names of every crew member aboard the Indomitable. At the base, a single line was etched in gold. Asterisk, they were our shield, our sword, and our salvation. Their light will guide us forever. Asterisk. Liana Vale's name was at the top, followed by the rest of her crew, each one a hero who had given everything to protect their people. Survivors from the fleet came to pay their respects, laying down wreaths, flowers, and personal mementos. Among the visitors was a young pilot, his arm in a sling and his face lined with exhaustion. He stood before the obelisk, silent for a long time before speaking softly. They said we couldn't win, he murmured. They said no one could stand against the Primarchs. But you didn't just stand. You fought. And you gave us a chance. He stepped back, his gaze lingering on the memorial before he turned and walked away, joining the others in the long uphill battle to rebuild. In the years that followed, the Indomitable's story became legend. Tales of its final stand spread across the galaxy, inspiring resistance movements on occupied worlds and bolstering alliances between human and alien factions. The ship's name became a rallying cry, a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming odds, humanity could rise, fight, and triumph. Far from Earth, in the silent depths of space, a fragment of the Indomitable drifted among the wreckage of the Eternal Sovereign. It was a twisted piece of hull plating, its surface scorched and blackened. Inscribed on its battered metal, just barely visible, were the ship's last words. Asterisk, humanity endures. Asterisk, and it did.